Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. And today, as my very special guest, I have Matthew
Dedewo.
Dewedo. Did I say it correctly?
Dedewo.
Dedewo. I'm
Yes.
sorry. I was afraid I was going to mess that up, and I did mess that up. Okay, Matthew, it is good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored to be on the show.
And thank you to everyone in the chat. So far, I see Mr. Shadow Kitty, Purple Rhymes with Orange, and Spaghettiist. And I'm sure we have more joining us as we go along. I have to start out by saying thank you to all of my viewers. I am just absolutely thrilled to death. The video that I put out, just that I released just yesterday, already has over 8,000 views, and that is the most views I have ever gotten on a video that was not a collab. And so I just thank you all for watching that. It has been an absolute honor to get that kind of exposure. So thank you, everyone. And Matthew, today we are here to talk about your book, and tell us the title of your book.
The title of the book is God Doesn't Care as Much as You Do.
Okay. And let's start with a little bit of background about you so people can understand where you're coming from. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about your educational background.
Oh, wow. How far back should I go? Well, I was born in a Christian home.
Okay.
So I was in a Christian church till the age of 16. That's when I started having questions that I just wasn't getting answers for. So at some point, once I got old enough to tell my parents, no, I'm not going to church today, I said, no, I'm not going to church today. So that's where it started. Atheism crept in shortly after that because I just couldn't understand why the world was the way it was, why God just wasn't doing. And that's because of all the answers that I wasn't able to get as a child.
So basically, the problem of evil was the issue for you?
Not just the problem of evil, the problem of representing himself. Like, for example, he stopped Paul on the road to Damascus, and Paul was out there murdering Jews. I'm a good person. Why couldn't you do that to me? So it was like, something's just not right here.
So
And
divine hiddenness.
yeah, exactly. And
That's exactly what it. Yeah, that was the first major fracture in my faith as well, and it was over the exact same passage. The conversion of Paul.
yeah, and then it wasn't until much later I realized he doesn't really have time for me like that. Like, why would he? But then again, I want to correct. It's very difficult to do that. I really want to eliminate the term God. I feel that is just sends off the wrong message. There's so many gods, so I look at it as there are higher beings that early humans worshipped, and there is an ultimate perfect power. So the ultimate perfect power does not care as much as we do. And so continuing on, so I fell in love with science, and it was through science that I'm starting to realize that if science is the study of existence, something that was created by God, then science must be the study of God. And I started learning about the true nature of the human being, and I said, I'm not that much different from the laws of science and the laws of physics. So maybe that's what the creator is. And then eventually I eliminated the word creator because energy can't be created.
What do you mean by that? That you're not much different than the laws of science and the laws of physics?
Well, we're all energy when you break us down. We're atomic particles spinning at different frequencies. And even our thought processes, they follow the laws of physics. For example, the first law of physics says an object at rest will stay at rest unless impacted by an unbalanced force. A person that's in their comfort zone isn't going to want to move until something jerks them and they're no longer comfortable. So it can all be translated to mean the same thing. So that's when I realized if we are science, then God is also science. And that's when I started nitpicking, why does religion believe this? Why do atheists believe that? And that's when I came to the book. As far as my educational background, I'm pretty much self-taught. I started reading about different religions at a young age, parapsychology, mythology, reincarnation. But officially, my line of work is financial sales. I do have an MBA in financial services, which
Oh,
is weird because I'm sort of like Matthew, the tax collector in the Bible that eventually, but I didn't intend it that way.
okay. Eric Mishima asks, "Are you a believer?"
I believe in an ultimate perfect power, yes, but I do not believe that the God of the Old Testament or any of the gods worshipped by early humans match the characteristics needed to be an ultimate perfect power. But I do believe there is a supreme entity out there.
Okay. Would you consider yourself a pantheist?
Absolutely. Maybe not the term itself, because, but that's what, and that realization just came to me the last couple of years. Even though I had written this book about 2006, I just decided to rewrite it. But that seems to be the only way that an entity can be omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. If pantheism is the way to look at it. And
Okay.
when you look at it that way, then science is the study of God.
Okay. But in your view, this being is not all loving, though.
No, loving is a human concept.
Okay.
But I did mention in the book the closest thing to love would be maybe like a self-preservation type of thing. Like, I set this stuff in motion, I want to keep the motion going. That's where the infinite process comes in. So as long as there's motion, as long as everything is working smoothly, I'm not worried about the small details. For example, billions of cells die on a weekly basis on our body. We don't really care about it because as long as the total machine is working fine, there's no issues. But if too many cells are dying in one part of the body, that's when focus gets directed there. So, but the little petty things on this tiny planet Earth, I just don't see ultimate perfect power being absorbed in it.
I don't disagree with you on that, but I question whether human beings are the only ones that exhibit love. I can certainly see exhibited in the animal kingdom things that would definitely be considered loving.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
By when I say human beings, I don't mean just human beings. I mean, I'm pretty sure aliens exist. I'm pretty sure they have their version of love.
Mm,
So that
okay.
was me misspeaking. But as far as I love this species more than this species, no, or I love this part of the galaxy more than I love that part of the galaxy, no. It's all general. It doesn't specify. That's like, I don't know, me saying that I like my head more than my feet.
Okay. What was your purpose in writing the book?
My purpose, I feel like I have been given a mission. And on Twitter, I try to show that both sides are incomplete in their lines of thinking. So I don't just challenge theists, I challenge atheists as well. And I
Mhm.
think because we're sort of like swinging at each other in the dark, and this is a waste of time. There's so much other things
Mm,
humanity could be doing if we could just move past this. I'm
mhm.
reminded of that movie, Star Trek. I'm not sure which one it was, where the Enterprise went to some distant planet and they weren't supposed to interfere, but they needed to stop the volcano from erupting. While leaving, the natives saw them and they drew the ship and they started worshiping the ship. The Federation didn't want things like that because civilization shouldn't be interfered with. I feel that's sort of what happened to us. But instead of fixing it, they said, like, you know what, we've already done enough damage, let's just leave. All of a sudden, no more gods performing miracles. Everything just sort of died down, and it's just been carried on through the humans that still follow them. But what was the original question?
The original question was, what was the purpose of the book?
Oh, yeah. So I feel like I've been given the opportunity to try to end this debate. And so in the book, I'm just straight to the point. I leave I, me, and we out of it because I think humanity needs to look at itself from the outside rather than each individual trying to look at the outside from their perspective. It's just not going to work.
In one respect, I think we have very similar purposes, because the purpose of my channel is to try to get people past their religious beliefs. But But my purpose is very similar to yours, because I think you're right that if we can get past religious beliefs, we can accomplish so much more as a species. When I look at how much time and money is wasted in the efforts of worship and missions and spreading the word and convincing other people of our faith, if we could put all of those resources into feeding the poor and into building affordable housing, if we could put all of those resources into helping one another instead of trying to get one another to believe in a particular deity, I think we could accomplish so much more.
So much more, but we'll never know until someone steps out and takes care of that. That's why I think we connected, because I don't see you as an extreme atheist. To me, an extreme atheist is someone that they're just out there to argue. They're just there to watch your tweets and you're very straightforward. And why would a God do this? But then you have some people that they just want to argue. Their goal is not to find a middle ground, try to understand where the other person is coming from. They just want to enforce their belief. And the same thing, theists and atheists. So, but enough is enough. You're both wrong. So step to the side, let someone else break everything down. So that's what I try to do with the book.
Why do you think there is a supreme being?
I don't think why is necessity. Why is something that comes into play when you don't know everything. Being omniscient means you already know everything, so there wouldn't be a why. The why would only come from our perspective. And why, to me, to answer that question, I would say because if you just keep digging, you have to at some point, reach a point where you can't dig any further. One of the books that inspired my line of thoughts was a book by Joseph Chilton Pearce called Crack in the Cosmic Egg. So he basically states that everyone lives in a cosmic egg. And until there's a crack in that cosmic egg, there's no need for you to go beyond that. At some point, you keep, each time you come out of your egg, you find yourself in a bigger egg. At some point, you'll reach with this just one big egg and you can't go any further. That is what I feel the supreme being is. And the term being is another term I'm trying to stay away from, because it makes people think of humans. Like, oh, he must have likes and dislikes. He must have this, or he must have a penis. No, we are so much more than that. And that's just because once we became part of this matter, we identified with it. But once we leave it, we go back to our natural state, which is just pure energy. And there is no being. It's like saying there are male or female atomic particles. No, they just are.
Okay, but what I'm wondering is, since your purpose is to try to get people past religious ideas, why do you hold to any religious ideas yourself? Why not just keep those up?
I don't. That's the thing it's not a religious idea. I believe in an ultimate perfect power. Now, I will say I'm a Christ enthusiast, and I can elaborate more on that, but I feel that going back to the pantheistic view, if the ultimate perfect power is the body, then the infinite process, which is the laws of science, the laws of physics, all that stuff would be like the circulatory system, the nervous system of that entire body. And then there will also be an immune system. Remember when I said if cells are dying every day, but until there's a whole bunch of cells dying in an abnormal part of the body, there's no need to focus on that. That focus is the energy of Christ. So that is the closest I would get to religion. And Christ, the energy of Christ to me, and I'm trying to find a better term for it, but I couldn't, isn't just religious. I believe Einstein possessed the energy of Christ. You possess the energy of Christ because you're trying to heal something. Anytime somebody sees something that's wrong and they have that desire to heal it, that desire comes from someplace. And I think that same energy is coming from the universe. But again, the ultimate perfect power doesn't care about as much stuff as we do. But being that we are caught up in the mix, if we see something wrong, we need to fix it. And that is as closest to religion as I would get.
Now, when you say Christ, are you referring to Jesus?
Yes, but there's a whole section, the misinterpretation of Christ, in the book. And that's when I explained, but before I even get to that, I explain how human nature is. I explain the real reality. This way, when I say that Christ was just the end form of energy that came at a time that needed to be, what's the word, some clarification, some explanation, that is the energy of Christ.
Do you believe that in the New Testament and what it teaches about who Jesus was and who Christ was?
I believe in the teachings of Christ, not so much the teachings of the disciples. One of my favorite quotes is by Gandhi. He says, I love Christ, the Christians not so much because they are so much unlike Christ. The New Testament and Christianity has gone so far away from Christ. That is why so many people are leaving. I believe in his teachings, and one teaching that I focus on is he asked us to follow the spirit behind the law, not the letter of the law. So the spirit behind it. So that's when I started realizing, wait a minute, I don't think he was sent by the God of the Old Testament, because if you follow the spirit of his teachings, they are almost the opposite. I mean, the God of the Old Testament hid knowledge in a tree away from humans, and he punished them when they ate it. Christ is giving it away for free. I want to explain this to you. I want to explain that to you. And in some of his parables, when he explains it, it brings to light the pantheistic view of things, the ultimate perfect power. It doesn't bring to light a God that was meddling with humanity from the time that it came to acknowledgement of itself. So I do believe in the teachings of Christ. I don't believe in the New Testament. Unfortunately, the New Testament was the only way I could get access to that. But again, the energy of Christ knows itself. That's, for example, how we were able to connect with each other like, hey, we're kindred spirits. Buddha, his teachings also emulate the teachings of Christ as far as pulling away from physical desire and lifting yourself and not being focused in the physical. So if the two of them met, they would have been great friends. They would have had a romance.
Jesus in the New Testament, Jesus talks about Jonah, he talks about Adam and Eve, he talks about Moses. He references stories of the Old Testament as if they were history. So if Jesus really is a high being that has so much greater energy than most people, why is he making references to these stories which aren't true if he supposedly knows that?
That is a very, very good question. Remember the section of the book where I talked about identity? Once the energy of the soul merged with matter, it sort of identifies with it. So he just happened to merge with the Jewish kid. So he had to grow up as a Jewish kid. He had to, if he was to minister to Chinese people, he would have to speak Chinese, if Mandarin. If he was to minister to an African, he would have to speak their particular language. So he used what they learned. I mean, what their stories were. And each of those stories, if you break them down, he is sort of showing that he is not sent by the Old Testament God.
Okay. Okay. We do have a question from one of the viewers. Do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead?
That is a tough question. I would have to say I do not have a point of view on it, because going by history, and that was one of the first things I checked, did this guy really exist? There are a lot of theologians and historians who admit that there was a person that existed. Okay, so great, he existed. These teachings, they say he said, it sounds like he might have said them. As far as rising up from the dead, I don't really see the significance behind that, unless if you're still going by the Old Testament. And I don't think Jesus was connected to that. The sacrifice, the rising from the dead, that's something that, why would he need to spend 3 days in hell? I mean, why would he even need to die? Just so that, hey, I'm above death. That is the whole of, oh, we've now defeated death. So I don't believe in the original sin. So I don't believe that Christ needed to die or rise from the dead in order to change that, because they're not connected.
It sounds to me like when you read the Old Testament, anything that agrees with your ideas about God is true, and anything that doesn't agree with your ideas about God, therefore, did not happen.
What do you mean?
Okay, well, we're going through some of the things in the New Testament, and you're saying, well, I think these things in the New Testament really happened. I think these are true because they align with my ideas of who the supreme being is. They align with my idea of who Christ is. And other portions that don't align with who your idea of who Christ is, you don't believe those portions.
Yes, and remember, you said that Jesus referred to like Moses, the sign of Jonah.
Mm-hmm.
All those, for example, Moses gave basic laws: do not steal, do not commit murder, all those things. Those are pretty much good laws. If you just stick with the Ten Commandments, we should be fine. But once Moses was gone, humanity always likes to complicate things, started adding all this other stuff. Oh, you have to do this. 10 commandments became hundreds. So when he was
Okay,
saying,
you're straying too far from the question.
okay,
The question was, is it you that determines the qualities of Christ or of the supreme beings? Since you read this and you decide, okay, this agrees with my ideas of the supreme being or supreme whatever, supreme energy, and these do not agree with my ideas of the supreme energy, therefore these are true and these are false. And it sounds to me like the qualities of the supreme energy or whatever come from your head.
no, they come from nature. They come from the laws of science. That's where my head gets it from. They're not formulated fantasies. And I've backed everything up in the book. Remember, in the book, there's no I or me or we. I back everything up with either evidence, scientific evidence, logic, common sense, or reasoning. Because in the absence of evidence, that's all we really have to rely on. But if you're talking about that particular question, the sign of Jonah, when he said the sign of Jonah, Christians naturally took at it as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days, Christ was in hell for 3 days. But the connection goes deeper than that. When Jonah's message was received by the town of Nineveh, they weren't destroyed. So the book of Revelations that so many Christians are anticipating, it's never going to happen. Once people learn the true message of Christ, the world will change and there will be no need for destruction. So
But if the
that's
way
like,
we determine which portions are the real message of Christ is what resonates with our own ideas of what is the supreme,
well, that's why I
then
said
then Christ is different for each person.
That's why I said you have to follow the spirit of the Lord, not the letter of the Lord. Like if you said Christ says this, I would say that doesn't make any sense. If Christ is supposed to be loved, why would he say this? So that I would say, no, I don't believe Christ said that. So I'm not going by the letter of the law. I'm going by the spirit behind the law. Like if
Well,
you're
I'm not talking about the law at all, let alone whether it's the
no,
letter
not
or the spirit.
when he said the letter of the law, I don't think he meant the actual laws like the Ten Commandments. He just meant letter. Like if you follow the Bible literally, you're gonna get twisted and tongue-tied. There's so many different versions of the Bibles that contradict themselves. I was just on
Mhm.
Twitter one time. They said Jesus rode on a donkey and a colt. So someone had a picture of a colt on top of a donkey and Jesus on top of the colt. So if you follow the literal version of the Bible, you're gonna get lost. But it's the spirit behind it. If he says he came from love and he is here to spread the love, anything that contradicts that, I don't believe in it. Because again, it was written by man. They say they were inspired by God, but it was still written by man. So I'm going to take everything with a grain of salt. I guess that's what I would answer. I'm taking everything with a grain of salt.
Hold that thought. I want to get back to it, but I've got a couple of questions and comments I want to get to. Spaghettius says, didn't Buddha live before Christ? So wouldn't it be the other way around?
Well, again, the reason why I chose Christ, and I don't know if spaghetti guys came on when I said that. I'm trying to find a different term for that but I can't because that seems to be the most prominent incarnation of him. But it could be the energy of Buddha, whatever you want to say, but it's an energy that's like the immune system of the universe. So again, one would know each other. They will all seem similar.
And Mr. Shadow Kitty makes a really good point here. You know, you've been talking about the 10 Commandments, and if we follow the 10 Commandments, we're doing pretty good. And Mr. Shadow Kitty says the 10 Commandments, 4 of them are pretty good. And part of what he's referencing there is the first 4 commandments of the 10 Commandments are all about how you worship God. You know, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall make no graven images. You remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. Do not profane my name. Yes, I know all the 10 Commandments. But if you don't believe in an actual being that needs to be worshipped, all 4 of those commandments are completely worthless.
But remember, these were higher beings that early humans chose to worship. So it chose, and you can again, if you read the Bible, the Tower of Babel, it's like there's
Hmm.
little insights here and there. Humanity came together as one, or humanity was one at one point, and they were trying to build a tower to see the heavens or whatever. And they were like, no, we can't allow them to do that because they would be like us. Even in the very beginning, let's make man in our image. So there was a lot more than one. They chose different sects of humans, different cultures to monitor and manage. And that particular one said, don't have any gods other than me. I want to be the only God you're worshiping. But there were other higher beings. But put that to the side. The words that were given to Moses about not killing yourself, all that stuff. I mean, not killing each other. Those were good. So, but if you take aside that higher being, their interference, well, some might say well, that's a question for philosophers. Would them not interfering, would we be better than where we are right now, or no? But it's time to move on from that.
Okay, now you're referring to the Old Testament gods as beings.
Higher
And
beings.
from the way, okay, so you think there are beings that exist that are gods?
They are not gods. That's why I said I wanted to eliminate the term God, because God is it just makes you think, oh, it's a supreme being. No, there's God
Okay, so
above
but you think there
yeah,
are
higher
beings
beings. Yes.
outside of humanity that, and they created humanity?
They did not create humanity. They might have stumbled upon it, because just like we will stumble upon our early civilization, but they are not the ultimate perfect power. But I do believe in higher beings.
Okay. Do these higher beings have physical bodies?
They could have, who knows? I mean, if we, using the exact same example, because in the absence of evidence, we have to use logic and reasoning. If we were able to start traveling through space and we went to a galaxy far, far away, encountered a civilization that was in the caveman state, they would think we were gods because we dropped from the sky chariots of fire and shooting thunder from our hands, which is a gun, but they don't know what a gun is, so it's thunder from their hands. So they would see us as gods, but we would just be higher beings. Now, if they are physical, again, I do not know. The best that I can do is use logic and reasoning in the absence of evidence. And I don't think they would be physical, because then at some point they would have to die. The physical matter at some point decomposes. So maybe they were able to and lift themselves up to just being energy, just being consciousness, just like we are. At some point, maybe 300-400 years down the road, we will find a way to take someone's consciousness and just put it on a supercomputer with 1,000 servers or something like that. I do believe it's possible, based on where we're
Okay.
headed.
Now I'm getting confused because you talk about these beings as not being, they're not gods, and yet you also accept that let us make man in our image was something that these beings said, but these beings didn't create man. Why
Well,
would they say that if they didn't do it?
again, reading everything with a grain of salt. I mean, you take the first, in the first day, he created light. And then day four, he created the sun and the moon, which is where light comes from. So what kind of light? It doesn't make sense. That's the thing about it. So we have to try to make sense out of it. So that is
Why?
why I say, what,
Why?
take, why do we have to try to make sense out of it?
Yeah, why not just say this is nonsense and dismiss it and move on?
Because then we're no better than the theists who tell us that our scientific views are nonsense, and I'm trying to find a common ground here. And I don't want to assume that thousands of people, thousands of years ago, all had mass delusion. I mean, that takes a lot of faith. There must have been something that made them think they were a higher being somewhere. They definitely were not gods, but there had to be something that made them think that. I don't think it was just
Okay. And
mass delusion.
I don't think it was mass delusions or hallucinations either, because you know even they don't write about that. They don't write about ever having seen these alleged gods. But what I do see is people tend to look for patterns in things. And so when you grow your crops and you have a terrible year, and the following year you accidentally burn a goat in front of your crops, and that year the crops grow great, you think, there's a higher being there that wants me to sacrifice a goat. And so after that, you start sacrificing a goat every year. And that is how I see God's coming about is people can't explain things. It must be some kind of higher being. We don't know where the lightning came from. Maybe there's another being up in the clouds that's doing that. And I think that's where God's come from. It's pattern seeking, and it's our search for finding meaning where we don't have any answers.
Okay, so two things. First, I want to attack address you burn the goat and something good happens and it's continue. There's the placebo effect. There's the
Mhm,
observer effect. As
mhm.
humans, we do have power to affect our surroundings. We do have power to affect ourselves. So maybe me praying as hard as heck got me over that cold. I want to attribute it to Jesus. That's all me. But we do have that power. But again, going back to the higher beings, I cannot bring myself to believe that humanity is as great as this universe has been able to create in 14 billion years. I mean, it's a bit self-centered and egotistical to think that there can't be anything higher than us. And that's a problem I have with a lot of atheists. You use the word greater, oh man, the facts come out. No, there's nothing greater than us, nothing greater than the universe.
I've
And my
never
first,
heard an atheist say that.
there was a YouTube, because I just started marketing the book. I went to one of these YouTube videos like yours, and I was typing in, and I was thinking that the people giving the show were going to see my question. No, it was the list of people that were just chatting in. They were just going into a chat box. As soon as I asked a question, they just jumped on me like, "Oh, he's trying to sneak the word greater in there," because it's almost like the fear, the possibility of anything after death creates some fear in them because it's unknown. I don't know what it is, so I want to challenge it at every point. The same thing with the theists. The fear of the unknown is something that what happens after death is something that they fear, but they are choosing to worship, relying on higher beings for that. So it both boils down to the fear of, the unknown. There's just so much information. Like I told you before, I tend to ramble on, so I don't know if I answered your question.
Okay, there's a question I've been holding for quite some time here, which is who decides what the spirit of the law is?
That's a very good question. Um, so when I look at the universe and how it works, so I guess the universe would be the best way to determine that. Um, I wouldn't see myself sacrificing one of my children or telling my son to go attack my daughter because she disobeyed me. So something like that, I'm like, okay, that doesn't seem right to me. It must not be right in the Bible. And Jesus even said that. He said, "Who amongst you would, if your child asks for stone, will get bread, will give them stone, or if they ask for a bird, will give them a snake." So if you humans know what is good, how could you expect less of that from the Father, which is different from the Old Testament God? So if you can reword that question to be, "Who amongst you would give birth to a child, not one, but millions, not 1 year, but thousands of years, and just throw them to the side just to focus on one?" That is why I said, no, the Old Testament God cannot be the Father that sent Christ. He's speaking about a higher being. So things like that, common sense. Again, in the absence of evidence, we have to rely on logic and common sense. So I think that would be what determines what the spirit of the Lord would be.
Do you think there is a Father God?
The ultimate perfect power. I think that's what Christ referred to as the Father.
Okay. And do you think that that ultimate power created Christ?
No, there's no way to create things because that would violate the laws of science. Christ is an extension of him. Just like that example, which was the best way I can try to explain it, because we're talking about concepts that are beyond the grasp of a human mind. If going back to the pantheistic view, if the ultimate perfect power was the body, the infinite process would be the laws of science and everything. Christ would be the immune system. So he's not separate.
You're
He's just
you're
part of it.
expressing the same idea you just refuted a minute ago.
What?
Well, you were saying that atheists make the mistake of claiming that humans are the highest and ultimate purpose, and you just said that the ultimate purpose is the body.
No, I use that as an example of trying to explain it. The ultimate, okay, so pantheism says that God is the universe is God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the infinite process, which are the laws of science, that would be like the nervous system of God, making sure everything is working properly, right? Christ would be the immune system, making sure, stepping in when things need to be adjusted. So I'm not saying that atheists were right that there's nothing higher. There's definitely a lot higher than humanity.
I don't really think atheists say that because, and when I say that, I don't mean that there are no atheists that say that. There may be somewhere, because obviously I haven't listened to all atheists. But on the other hand, what I hear from the majority is that we are not the goal of the universe. The universe didn't set out to make humans. And we may die out and there may be another species that supplants us that may be superior to us. And I know a few atheists that would deny that possibility.
Yes, and those are the atheists that I'm speaking about. And you could also reverse the process. Maybe there was something greater than human that existed before we came out and they got wiped off. But as far as death not being the end, the laws of the conservation of energy state that energy does continue. So that's what I mean by not saying that Christ was created by God. Everything already existed. It's just been reformed or transformed. So when you look at it from that perspective, you start seeing these so-called gods are just higher beings that were just part of the process. And early humans just chose to worship them. Not because they were malicious, or
Do you
maybe it
think
was
the
just out of
universe
necessity.
do you think the universe has always existed in its present state?
No, I do not believe it. In the section where I talked about the four-stream theory, uh, a lot of atheists try to say that there was no cause to the Big Bang, but that would violate the laws of motion. The universe was in a different state before it exploded, and so there had to be a cause behind that. But in my book, I talk about the big crunch being the necessary end of the universe. So
The
if
big
you have,
crunch?
yes. So at
Okay.
some point, it stops expanding and it just collapses on itself, right back to that singular
Okay,
point,
so
and then it
you're
just pops
kind of
back
into
out
the
again.
bounce theory?
Yeah, I guess that's what it is. I'll look into it and see what that is. But yeah, so
The
it's
the
just a
bounce
constant.
the bounce theory says that the universe is timeless, that it collapses into itself and then expands outward and then collapses. And it may have been doing this throughout infinity. We really don't know.
Okay, yes. I do agree with that. It makes sense. Again, see, I don't need to. Um, it just makes sense to me because the universe cannot keep expanding forever. And another thing to
Why do you say that?
because according to my theory, dark matter is something that can be reduced if
According
enough.
to me, the universe can't expand past a certain point, according to me. You know,
Okay, but where am I getting that? It's not something I'm using logic and common sense. Remember, in the absence of evidence, it's about logic and common sense. So if someone has something that makes more sense than me, I'm ready to jump on board. But
uh-huh.
until then, I haven't come across anything that makes more sense than that. Because they say that as if the big
Okay, but
crunch,
what if something makes more sense to you, but something different makes more sense to me? Does that make both our ideas right?
we would sit down and come together as two grown adults and see what exactly, because they say truth is not absolute, but for example, killing someone else is not good. But if it's in self-defense, then it was necessary. So things like that, we can come to an agreement where, okay, part of this is true, and maybe this needs to be added to this. I mean, that's how science was evolved, right? People coming together and putting ideas and minds together. So it might seem right to you, something else might seem right to me. Let's come together amicably and discuss it. But that's tough.
I have no qualms with that. In fact, that is one of the things that I try to do on this show frequently is bring people who have different viewpoints on to discuss them. But just because we discuss it doesn't mean we're going to come to agreement.
That is true, but you're laying a seed. And if it's a truly a questioning mind, they will continue to ponder it. That's the beautiful thing about the mind. We continue to ponder things, unless you just accept something and that's that. But as you continue to ponder it, you're going to come across more information, just like the bounce theory I just came across.
Mhm.
So we're going to keep coming across more information and we're going to grow. Our knowledge is going to grow. This book is not the final book. I mean, a couple of years from now, I might write another book. Hey, I've come across even more things. So this theory needs to be adjusted. But putting something out there that ends the back and forth needs to be done. And for me to wait until it was perfect, then it would never get published.
Do you think religions are just elevated superstitions?
Elevated superstitions.
Mhm. You know, various people have various superstitions in various cultures, like knocking on wood or crossing your fingers. And to me, religion is little more than just superstition elevated to the point where we've got the whole group believing in the superstition. We meet to discuss our superstition, and um, we we worship this superstition, and we
Oh,
obey this
yes.
superstition. And so that's the way I see religion, is just an elevated superstition.
Yes, absolutely. And as I explained earlier, the reason why I left church at the age of 16 is because I wasn't getting answers that suited these elevated superstitions. And I was looking for scientific explanations of them. And if
Mhm.
they had given me a scientific explanation, I would have at least said, okay, they're mistaken. But I'm thinking now that it's more like blind faith. I don't know if you've ever heard of in some cultures, they call it a demon sitting on their chest, where
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
So science has broken it down to a combination of sleep paralysis, waking up in non-REM sleep, and adrenaline breaking you free of that. Not your prayer is breaking you free of that. So that
Mhm.
is a scientific explanation of a superstition. And I believe all superstitions should be able to be explained scientifically, even if it comes down to the point of you were afraid, you needed something to comfort you, and that's why you came up with that. But there has to be a scientific explanation. I don't think the supernatural exists. It's just stuff that hasn't been explained yet. But yes, according to your question, I do believe religion is elevated superstitions.
Okay, and I'm glad you brought up science, because that reminded me of something I wanted to get back to with what you brought up with the Tower of Babel. Now, do you think that that literally happened?
I haven't seen any evidence that says it has. But again, the absence of evidence, logic, and reasoning. What was the term? There's a scientific term where it was all just one big landmass before. So I'm pretty sure all people were gathered together at one time. There had to be just one language. But at some point, different cultures, different religions, different beliefs. So I do believe in that separation. Now, each of these different beings, cultures, each had a different higher being they were worshiping. So yeah, sounds like they came together and said, all right, let's break them up. You watch over these guys, I'll watch over these guys. So again, in the absence of evidence, I'm just using logic and common sense. But again,
Okay. Um, just as when people spread out, their languages began to change because words evolve. We all know that language evolves. I mean, we use words today that 20 years ago didn't even exist. You know, the word selfie didn't exist, just 10 years ago. And when people spread out, they tend to develop words that differ from people that they are separated from. And of course, that's how language is developed as people spread out. Do you not think that that is also how different gods developed? That the people that went to this direction, started thinking about gods in one respect, and people that went in this direction thought of gods in another respect.
yes, that's possible. But again, there is evidence of the ancient aliens theory. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
You
Where
saying alias or aliens?
no, ancient aliens.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like for example, one culture said they were visited by chariots of fire from the sky, and that same a picture of that same similar being appears across the world. So I used to watch that show a lot. So again, I believe it's more than just mass delusion. There's something that stemmed to that. Whether it was something fell from the sky, an asteroid, and they thought it was a god descending, but it wasn't just let's just make this stuff up. I
Okay.
mean,
So
yeah.
in your view, the Tower of Babel did not occur after a global flood and after there had already been people throughout the rest of the world. This would have been something that would have occurred early in the existence of humans before human beings had begun to spread out, correct?
Yes, and again, we have to remember that the book of Genesis was written by Moses, who was not there. So it's not a first eyewitness account. So he's getting information from somewhere. And I'm also thinking, in the absence of evidence, you
Hold
probably
it.
use logic and reasoning.
The book of Genesis was written by Moses?
Yeah, I think Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible.
Okay, I realize that that is the traditional view among Christians, but that is not the view of biblical scholars, and it is not the view of textual critics. In fact, most people now agree that Moses didn't even exist as a person. Um, and there's certainly plenty of evidence that there were multiple authors of the Pentateuch, particularly of Genesis, particularly when you look at the story of when Joseph was sold into slavery. That half of the book says that he was sold by the Midianites, and in other verses he was sold by the Ishmaelites. And when you look at the verses as being two different versions of a story that were then mashed together by an editor, it makes perfect sense. But when you try to read it as one narrative written by one person, it makes no logical sense because you have this person being sold to two different people by two different people groups.
I agree with that. So it's not chronologically correct because I don't think when it was written, it was a first person eyewitness. Otherwise, we would have scrolls that are that old that say such and such happened. I think someone wrote those. That's someone's account. Whether it was Moses, I'm willing to accept. Okay, Moses didn't write that. It does make sense to me. I'm not one of those people that would, buckle down on the belief. So, but whoever wrote it, it was not an eyewitness account. So the Tower of Babel could have happened anywhere at any point in history. Yeah. So yeah.
Do you think there was a global flood?
Again, that's another story that there really isn't that much evidence for, and you have to take it with a grain of salt. And
Mhm.
if there was, I don't think Noah and his family were the only people that got their heads up because the story exists in other cultures where other people said, hey, let's create an ark. But I'm not 100% sure if it happened. But the only time I would use that in my defense of my theories would be to say that the God of the Old Testament is not omnipotent and omniscient because it actually says it, and it's sort of funny. I felt bad for the guy as he was flying over the earth. He was filled with regret, like, "Oh, things didn't work out the way that I planned." No, but that's not an ultimate perfect power. So that's the only time I will use that story, not for anything else.
Mhm. Um, do you think that there is an ultimate perfect power?
I believe there has to be. Again,
Mhm.
there has to be something beyond the universe. Otherwise, I mean, what is the universe expanding in? There has to be something that created the Big Bang, or not created, but initiated the Big Bang. So there has to be an ultimate perfect power. And
If there
science
was
is
an
still
ultimate
looking.
perfect power, why do we not have an ultimate perfect universe? Why didn't it make us a perfect universe where
Who
cancer
says the
doesn't
universe isn't
exist?
perfect? I mean, what do we
Well,
have to compare it
because
to?
suffering exists, and as long as suffering exists, the universe isn't perfect.
Well, I mean, okay, so, but you're looking at it as if suffering can't be seen as part of a cycle or something. In order to make a diamond, you'd have to put pressure on that coal. I mean, again, this is why I said God doesn't care, or the ultimate power doesn't care as much as we do, because we are in the mix, so we will see that suffering. The universe might just see it as a necessary process. So for us to say that it's not perfect, we would need to find something that is better than it that we can compare it to. And I don't think we have another
Well,
universe to
I
compare it
do
to.
think we can compare it to something better. Let's take the guinea worm, for example. The purpose of the guinea worm is, it eats out children's eyes and leaves them blind. Um, a perfect universe would not have guinea worms, or it would have guinea worms that had a different diet other than people's eyes. And uh, yeah, I just think it would be very easy to not make them or make them with a different diet if the goal of the perfect being was to create a perfect universe.
But again, it's not created. It was released. Tension was just released, and that pushed out all the energy that was already in existence, and it started forming. Going back to the guinea worm, I mean, if you look at atomic particles, an atom's goal is to fill its outer shell. It will take an electron from another atom. So, what about that other atom's feelings? I mean, is that atom evil or aggressive because it took an electron from another atom? No, that's just how it is.
And that to me is the atheist view of the world. There is no ultimate perfect being that created us
But
because,
it's not a being. You keep calling it a being. It's not a
well,
being.
you called it a being.
We need to work. It's going to take a lot of time. This is not going to happen in a few years, but we need to eliminate certain terms. And I'm struggling with that myself because until we find a better word for it, but ultimate perfect power meaning just force, it's just a force. Like, for example, okay, the grand unified theory, which is science's search for a theory that unites all the four fundamental forces. Whatever that will be, it will be a force greater than all four fundamental forces. It will be an even greater force. And would that be the ultimate force? As far as our universe is concerned, yes. Would it be perfect? I mean,
Mark Caesar asks, "Do you believe in heaven and hell?"
no, I do not believe in heaven and hell. It is possible. And again, I am a person that believes in possibilities. It is possible that a higher being can create an illusion such as that. If you think about the Matrix, how they create humans and they have not create humans, but they create a situation where humans think they're in a reality that's really not existing. So that would be something that's the closest thing that to heaven and hell there is. And I try to tell some atheists who I feel are afraid of the unknown, like, don't worry about it. As long as you didn't sign that donor card, there's no higher being that gets to determine what to do with your soul after you detach from this physical body.
Now, that makes no sense to me,
Right.
because atheists don't believe in a being that's going to do something to you after you die. So why would you need to assure atheists of something they already think?
Because it might be a fear. Why are they afraid of life after death?
I don't think they are.
But if I tell them it is possible for the consciousness to survive death, a lot of them would go mad.
I don't agree with you.
I
Because you
can
can tell
forward
me that all day long, and I'm not gonna believe
I,
you until you bring up some
because you
evidence
are not
for it.
an extreme atheist. That's why I love you, Gladys Granny. You are not an extreme atheist, but trust me, there are people out there who are that adamant. There was a young lady, she refused to admit the law of the conservation of energy because it implied that it's possible that consciousness could exist after death. So for some of them, it's just like, no, 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 because what if I'm wrong? Then I might end up in hell. But no, you don't have to worry about that. That's why I would assure those people.
I can't imagine that anyone would be afraid of ending up in hell if they actually were an atheist. Now, I'm not saying that you didn't encounter someone who claimed to be an atheist and made that claim. That's entirely possible. But if they really don't believe in any kinds of gods, then there is no hell to fear because there is no hell.
All right. So, but that fear, that's what I'm saying. If there's a fear there, I'm not 100% sure what that fear is.
Hmm.
But I'm just telling them, if it's hell, you don't have to worry about it because hell does not exist.
Okay.
Only if you sign up that donor card and tell them, hey, you get to do whatever you want with my soul when I detach, You don't have to worry about that. So you're fine. So let's open up to the possibility of understanding that consciousness could be eternal. Let's move past that. That's what I'm trying to get people to move past certain things.
Okay. I've kept this comment up because there's a second question here, which is, what is your purpose in believing that there is a supreme being running the universe? And I realize you don't really like the word being. Okay, what's your purpose in believing that there is a supreme power to the universe?
Okay, so by power, again, it might be a wording issue. But there's a force running the universe.
Mm-hmm.
It's a supreme force. It's greater than all the forces. We
Okay,
haven't
and
found it
why
yet.
do you think there is?
Because there has to be. That's why science
Why?
is looking for it.
Why
So
does
why
there
is
have
science?
to be?
But why is science looking for a grand unified theory then?
I don't think they are.
So the search for a grand unified theory has ended?
Well, okay. First of all, science is not my field, so I certainly can't
Oh,
speak to what
all right.
scientists may or may not be looking for.
Okay, so let me just a quick explanation. So science is trying to unify the quantum world and the big world. Einstein's general theory of relativity and the big and the small. So they believe that there's a theory that combines everything under one. So there must be one form of energy, one force that is powering everything. That is
I
what
don't think that's correct. I don't think that's what they're really looking for.
I'm 100%. I would say I'm 90% sure they are. I've researched the grand unified theory, and that's what they're looking for: a force that can unite the four fundamental forces. So that means a higher force.
Okay. I agree that they are looking for a force that unifies the other forces. I don't agree that that necessarily is a higher force.
Again, is it the word higher that makes you disagree? Because it's more
Yes,
powerful than.
yes, it is
Okay,
the
so
word higher
remember
that
I
makes
said
me agree.
words like higher, greater, they trigger atheists because they don't want. It's almost like a fear of acknowledging that there's something greater than us. No, don't use
Oh, I
greater
have
or
no
higher.
problem, acknowledging that something could be greater
Right,
than
so
us.
why wouldn't it be a higher force or a greater force?
I'm
If
not
it,
saying that there can't be one. I'm saying I don't think that that is the purpose of seeking the unifying force. I don't think that's really what scientists are trying to do, is trying to find a higher power or a higher force. I don't think that that's really the goal there.
I beg to differ. I believe that is what they're trying to do. For example, there's the electromagnetic force. They
Mhm,
joined it, but if you break it down, you have electricity, you have magnetism. So it's all joined in underneath the electromagnetic force. They believe that there's a force that everything, gravity, the
mhm.
electromagnetic force, the weak nuclear force, the strong nuclear force, all unite underneath. Because right now there are two separate theories, but there has to be one theory. Why not? Because it came from one singular point.
Mhm.
So there has to be one. Like that Highlander movie, there can be only one. There's one source of all things. Science
Okay.
is looking for that. And
Okay. We are running out of time here, so I'm
oh
gonna just
no,
wrap things up.
I
My
was
kids
just getting
always
started.
say that. They always say, You're kidding, we're actually out of time already?" Yeah, we are. We are already out of time. Before we go, if you are interested in Matthew's book, there is a link in the description where you can purchase it on at Amazon. There is also a link to Matthew's Twitter page if you want to interact with him individually and explore any of these topics further. You can do that there. Matthew, is there anything that you wanted to say that you hadn't had a chance to say yet?
I think you've said it all. And again, my goal is to end the endless debate between science and religion. And um, like Gallus Granny said, purchase the book. If you have any questions, and you will, I am open to discussing it all day. You could just reach out to me on Twitter. We can talk about this all day. This is one of my passions,
Okay.
other than anime.
Okay. And next week's guest is going to be Maya Atkinson, and we are going to be talking about Black History Month. And so we're going to talk about various things that she's doing for Black History Month and what we can do for Black History Month and promoting it. I think it's kind of dwindling a bit. We need to bring that back. So that's coming up next week. Well, thank you very much for Mike. I keep wanting to call you Michael. I do not
My
know why.
dad's name is Michael. I get that a lot. People always try to call me Michael. I'm like, that's my dad, not me.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for coming. It has been a pleasure having you on. And
Thank you. It was an honor.
thank you to everyone in the chat for your comments and questions. You always add so much to the show. And to everyone, live your life.